Day 2 of the preliminary hearing of accused child killer David. Air fresheners in the car, finances, a possible security guard. Not only are we going to get into the substance of the morning session of this hearing, but our reporter got very close to David in court, and what she observed was interesting. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, so we got day 2 of this preliminary hearing in the David case. Remember, he's facing first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, unlawful mutilation of human remains charges, all in connection with the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, whose decomposed, dismembered body was allegedly found in the front trunk of a Tesla, allegedly registered to him. This was back in September of 2025. This is a hearing where the court will determine if there's enough evidence for this to go forward to trial. I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get into what happened right now in the morning session. Let me bring in our eyes, our ears, someone who's been in that courtroom for the past 2 days, including this morning session. So happy to have her, NBC LA reporter Julia Deng, who I must tell you, terrific notes. I'm looking at the live notes that you've been sending us, so detailed, so thorough. Again, excellent work. Before we even get into the substance of what has happened in this morning session, you have to tell us what you've been seeing in that courtroom, specifically David, right? Because I understand you got really, really close to him today, right? What did you see?
I did, Jesse. But first, I just want to tell you again, it is such a treat to be on this show with you because I love watching it. So yes, I was sitting right behind David this morning. I somehow got a seat in front of where they were seating other reporters. I think it's because I actually walked in a little bit later than everybody else did. So because of that, they had me seated on the end of one of the attorneys' rows in that courtroom, and I was right behind David. He didn't look too great. You know, his hair is grown out. He is unshaven. He's wearing that LA County jail uniform, that orange jumpsuit, and he still has his feet and his waist shackled. He's not wearing handcuffs, though, so he was kind of splayed out in his chair, arms on his armrests. I could see his yellow legal notepad that he had laid out in front of him, so I was trying to take a peek, trying to see if he was taking any notes. He didn't have anything written down. But there definitely were moments this morning during cross-examination of witnesses where he did lean in and talk to his attorneys. The first time I noticed that, it was during cross-examination related to financial management. They were essentially talking about how much money he made through his record deal and how that money was divvied up. Because so many people were involved in this operation. So many people were making money off of him, to put it bluntly. And that's a key part of this case, because murder for financial gain is one of the special circumstances here that makes this eligible for the death penalty. But the district attorney, Nathan Hochman, did say yesterday they haven't actually decided yet if that's something they're going to pursue.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because the idea is, and I'm going to get to the witnesses who testified today, if they can show how lucrative his career was, at $11.5 million, that if Celeste came out and exposed him for this alleged illegal sexual relationship, she was going to take it all away. So the more they can amplify that, I get where they're going. I get what they're trying to do. Before, again, we get into the substance, I also understand that Celeste's family was back in that courtroom. We talked about yesterday how incredibly difficult it was for them to have to sit through the photos of Celeste's body dismembered, found in that Tesla. What was it like to see them in court today?
It's really tough. You know, Jesse, I told you yesterday, I cannot begin to imagine what they are going through. Yesterday, I was sitting directly behind them, 3 rows behind. Today, I'm sitting at an angle in the row right behind where they're seated. So I can see both of their facial expressions, the mother and father of Celeste. And I actually just ran into her mother, Mercedes, again upstairs in the restroom. it's really tough. Where we just wrapped before this lunch break, we were hearing testimony from an LAPD criminologist. This was one of the officers called to investigate after the Tesla was towed to one of their tech centers. So we were looking at photos the prosecutor was showing the court of 11 different air fresheners that were found in that Tesla. I mean, Celeste's remains had been in there decomposing, likely for months. So to cover up that smell, somebody put nearly a dozen air fresheners, not just inside the car, but actually in the front trunk.
Yeah.
And that's where the cadaver bags with her remains were found. So it's not just that this crime was committed, it's that somebody went to truly horrifying lengths, Jesse, to try and cover up their tracks. I could see her parents kind of shrinking into themselves and moving a little bit closer together when those photos came up. There's so many elements of this that are horrifying in ways I don't think we can fully imagine for them. So I'm curious to see what their attorney, what their wrongful death attorney, who's not actually involved in this criminal case, what he has to say to us later today. We chatted briefly upstairs. It sounds like he is going to take more questions from us later today.
Let me ask you now about the testimony. So they continue the testimony of Benjamin Greger. I don't know if I'm saying the name correctly, this Mogul Vision finance director, this business associate of David, talking about David's finances. Talk to me about what the start of today's testimony was like. And by the way, I was reading, is he an interesting witness? Is he a bit combative in a way? Is his testimony not consistent with what he told the grand jury? So what exactly is the tone of his testimony, and what did he say today?
Jesse, that's a really gentle way of putting it, inconsistent. Yeah, I noted that yesterday. I sent you guys a couple notes about that as it was happening. Yes, he does come across as a little bit combative when he's talking to prosecutors, when he's talking to the deputy DA here, Beth Silverman. When she was cross-examining him, there were several instances where he gave her answers that not just misaligned, but were in direct opposition to what he apparently said during grand jury hearings. And she was actually referencing transcripts from those secret grand jury hearings to verify that, to be like, wait a minute, did you mean this house or the other house was going to be put up as collateral so David could make bail? And then she asked him very pointedly several times, is your testimony accurate today or was it accurate then? So I think any instance where a witness is apparently changing their story on the stand, it makes you wonder, who had they been talking to? You know, was some kind of deal perhaps discussed or even struck? Why did their story change? And then obviously, what's in it for them? Because when he was being cross-examined by defense attorneys, I didn't note the same kind of misalignment. You know, there were more instances of Benjamin Greger, who was one of the financial managers for David when he first came to LA as a musical artist. There were more instances of Greger telling defense attorneys, yes, that's correct, that's the case, correct, I agree. I did not hear that when he was answering questions from the prosecutor.
So just to be clear, was his testimony supporting the idea that he had no idea about Celeste, that David was the one who was buying travel tickets for Celeste? Because a big theme of this is, who would have known about this alleged secret sexual relationship? Was he trying to suggest that David was the one who was buying things and the travel all on his own and he had no part in it?
This was my takeaway from Benjamin Greger's testimony, which is where we ended the hearing yesterday and where we started back up this morning. Celeste actually did not come up at all. The entire thing was just about financial management. And the narrative that I felt like defense attorneys were trying to push here was the idea that David didn't manage his own finances. He was living independently in LA for the very first time, away from his family. They were still in Texas. His parents had 2 younger kids. David has a younger brother and a younger sister. They were all out of state in Texas, and he was in LA alone. So it sounded to me like they were trying to paint a picture of a young budding artist who was busy with his recording career, in meetings every day, in recording sessions, meeting with producers, and not really, involved in the day-to-day financial management. So it became clear in their line of questioning from defense attorneys that Benjamin Gregor was primarily dealing with Colleen Burke. That's David's mother. She was the one who, according to Gregor, would pay half the rent on his house. She would pay bills. She set up companies in David's name for publishing, for merchandising. So I don't know. It sounds like the defense is trying to separate David somewhat from his finances. Yeah. So we'll see where that goes. But Celeste did not come up at all when they were talking to
That's
Gregor.
Interesting. Maybe they're trying to say, yeah, he really didn't have a good sense of how much he had to lose, about how lucrative his career was. But at the same time, how could he not know? Oh, I had to ask you, I saw this. Did Gregor mention this Sheldon character, this live-in security guard? Was that relevant to you?
Yeah, that came up this morning. I think all of this is trying to paint a picture of how removed David may have been from what was happening around him. But that's not the sense I got just looking at David sitting so close to him today. There was another witness who was called to the stand after Benjamin Gregor this morning from Interscope. And it was a similar line of questioning about accounts payable, how much money was made, money in, money out. And the way David was staring intently at the financial documents that were presented as exhibits, the way he was huddling with his own attorneys, and the way he seemed engaged during this cross-examination that, I'll be honest, was tedious. It was a little bit dry. I did not see many reporters around me, feverishly taking notes. But David's level of engagement during all of this makes me wonder if he actually had more of a hand in managing, or at the very least, understanding his own finances, how much he was worth, how much he was making, and how much more he could stand to make as an artist.
Talking about where I think, you tell me if I'm wrong, people probably started writing down feverishly, someone from the California Highway Patrol testified, right? Can you tell us who that person was and what they testified to?
So this was interesting for me personally, Jesse. It was a CHP officer, California Highway Patrol. He's assigned to the Santa Barbara area. As soon as he walked in and they said that, I thought, oh, here we go. This is going to be the piece of testimony during prelim related to Lake Cachuma up in Santa Barbara County. So I love that area. I love Santa Barbara. I actually took a road trip up there a couple of weeks ago, back in June, because I wanted to check out State Road 154 myself. We all read in court documents that a Caltrans worker back in January apparently found Celeste's ID up there. And prosecutors have been alleging that David took a trip up there the day after Celeste was allegedly stabbed and left to bleed to death. He allegedly drove up there in his own car to dispose of evidence. So this morning, the CHP officer testified that he was called to the scene after that Caltrans worker found the passport card. We actually saw a photo of that passport card. We saw a photo of exactly where, just off the roadway, it was reportedly found. And then we heard some back and forth where defense attorneys cross-examined him and asked, was there any traffic control? Do you know if it was found face up or face down? Was it buried under anything? Did it just rain a day or two ago? So there are questions about how exactly it ended up there. But it was very interesting to hear from a witness who was actually called to that scene after I drove up there myself because I was curious about where, off the roadway, how close to the lake this could have happened.
And the defense is questioning exactly how that passport card would have gotten there, that there were maybe other means other than David allegedly tossing it?
Absolutely. It sounds like they're setting up an argument where they could say that it was washed over there, by rainwater. It did just rain, I think, a day or two before it was found by that Caltrans worker beginning of January of this year. So this is months after the body was found last September. And this is more than half a year after she died last April. So there are a lot of questions about how it ended up there. I imagine the prosecution later on, they're going to share evidence about the drive up there because they are alleging that David took that trip in his own car. I don't believe the remains of Celeste were in that front trunk just yet. Again, this was April 24th, so that would have been the day after the alleged stabbing. And then later that day, this was wild, Jesse. We haven't talked about this yet in court during the preliminary hearing, but I know you've read this in the initial documents. That same day of the Santa Barbara road trip, April 24th, David went back home and then taped an interview promoting his album that came out the next day.
Yeah, and I wonder if the prosecution will say, my gosh, look at what he's doing, right? Pretty sick. The defense could say, if he really brutally killed someone, he's going to do an interview right after? I mean, is that what we're expected to believe? I wonder if that's where they're going to go. By the way, let me ask you this. Big picture here. You and I both know the standard for this to continue is very low. The prosecution has the advantage. All they have to show is probable cause to support these charges, not beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed these crimes or allegedly committed these crimes. Probable cause. It seems very likely the judge is going to look at the evidence when it's presented and say, this can go to trial. However, you are seeing the building blocks of the defense. Correct me if I'm wrong, but does it seem to you the defense has been saying over the course of 2 days, A, this is a sloppy investigation. Things were not tested the way they should be tested. You can't definitively say these items were used to kill or dismember Celeste. And also this one, the whole purchase history, all the things that he allegedly purchased after he allegedly killed her, the laundry bags, the cadaver bag, the chainsaws, that he didn't buy them before. So they're trying to set up the argument maybe this was not planned, that, hey, we don't really know the circumstances of what happened in that house. Maybe he acted in self-defense. Maybe it was a heat of the passion kind of killing. Am I totally off base? Or are you starting to see some of those things from the defense if this should go to trial?
I think you're spot on, Jesse. I think they're setting up a couple different arguments based on where this might go and what might come up next. I agree with you. I mean, the legal standard for this to have enough probable cause to go to trial is very low. This does not need to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt here. It's like a mini bench trial, and everybody covering this, I think, is expecting this to have enough probable cause to proceed to trial. It does give defense attorneys an opportunity to get a feel for witnesses that prosecutors are going to call. This is like a summary of the evidence and witness testimony. So that's going to help inform whatever kind of arguments they eventually want to present. I think they're testing out a couple different things right now, but you're right. That was a point that came up yesterday. The fact that all of these incriminating items that were purchased under a fake name but then sent to David's house, none of those purchases happened before April 23rd. Now, defense attorneys are not spelling out for us what they're trying to say by making that point, but they've definitely made that point. So we'll see where they go with that and everything else they've called out pretty methodically about the investigation, right? And the chain of custody with several pieces of critical evidence. You know, was that left alone? Did you have a log of everybody who was at the crime scene? Did you guys do traffic control for the entire time before CHP was called in after the Caltrans worker found that passport card? Did he note whether it was face up or face down? Did you fingerprint it? There's a lot of that, and I think defense attorneys are going to keep up that line of questioning, that type of cross-examination until we're done with this preliminary hearing, which could take up to 5 days.
Well, listen, Julia, I can't thank you enough for coming on. This is incredible reporting. We don't have cameras. We do not have audio equipment in there. It's not permitted. You have been really illustrating a picture for us about what has been happening there, and I know that our audience appreciates it. I know that I appreciate it, and I know you also have to jump back in. So, Julia Deng, thank you so much for coming on, and let's have this conversation tomorrow.
You bet. Thank you.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. See you next time, everybody.